number one, I think that anybody who uses cannabis medically should have the ability to grow as much cannabis as they need for their medical problem. We glorify and deify the fictional character known as John Wayne, whose real name was Marion Morrison, who was a tackle who injured his knee for USC. And one of the things that the characters that Marion Morrison / Don Wayne played were self-reliant, personally responsible characters in the Western development of this country. So the growing your own cannabis for medicinal use is strongly incorporated into the at least fictional persona of the pioneers in the United States. The other thing about growing your own is that the United States was founded on hemp, and hemp and marijuana are essentially the same plant. As a matter of fact, most of the colonies were required by law to grow hemp. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington both grew hemp. Why not? This was a crop they were mandated to grow. Jefferson was very, very enthusiastic about hemp and felt it was much better for the land than tobacco. Washington, of course, famously wrote in his diaries that he hoped that he would get back in time for the burning of the slag because he so in time for the hemp harvest because he so enjoyed the burning of the slag. So we can only guess as to why he enjoyed the burning of the slag. The slag being the waste product from the hemp plant, which would include the flowering tops because they're growing hemp for fiber. He also wrote that he was interested in separating the male from the female plants. Some people have read that as that he was using the cannabis for medicine or for recreation, but it could just be a demonstration that he was using it for fiber. I mean, because he wanted the male plants for fiber and not the female plants. So we have been growing hemp in this country for years and years. As a matter of fact, the first Secretary of the Department of Agriculture was a man named Dodge, who at one time was governor of the state of Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. And in fact, until the Tea Party legalized the growing of hemp in 10 states a year and a half ago, Wisconsin was the place where the last legal hemp plant was grown, which was in 1957. And the reason that you had a hemp industry in Wisconsin was that in the 1880s, the use of hemp really dropped dramatically because you had the steam engine, steam-powered ships that were replacing the sail-powered ships, and you also had increasing competition for much cheaper cotton because of the cotton gin, and that had been around since 1820s. Nevertheless, Dodge encouraged the growing of hemp in Wisconsin, and hemp was grown there for many, many years. I don't see any problem with people who have cannabis requirements for medical purposes growing their own. And of course, hemp was made illegal by the oil companies. The petrochemical industry, in the figure of Lamont DuPont, are fingered as principally being responsible for the Marijuana Tax Act. We know that the Marijuana Tax Act had nothing to do with health because the AMA testified against the Marijuana Tax Act and said in the 2 years that it was developed in secret, even though their chief attorney, who also was a doctor in addition to being a lawyer, had been there more than 10 times. They never brought it up to him, even informally, and they never formally asked the AMA for their input. And he testified that the AMA knew of no dangers from the medical use of cannabis. So it had to do with concerns about Henry Ford, hemp ethanol, and the fact that he had a prototype car in the late 1930s, early 1940s, that was made almost entirely out of hemp, had to do with the fact that DuPont made tetraethyl lead, an additive for gasoline, and if that were replaced with hemp ethanol, who needs tetraethyl lead? They also made the sulfites that are necessary for making paper from both wood pulp and hemp, which need 4 times as much to make it out of wood pulp as you do out of hemp. They also made nylon and rayon, which are synthetics made from wood, from cellulose. You could make synthetic fiber equally easily out of hemp. And it seems to me there was one other thing that they were making, cellophane, that they also made from cellulose. Oh, and of course they make ammunition, and munitions require cellulose. And the hemp hurd, the waste product of hemp, is entirely cellulose. So the oil companies knew that they couldn't say we want to make hemp illegal, we want to make cannabis illegal, because doctors were writing millions of prescriptions a year that contained cannabis. Hemp was used in bird seed. It was used as making the oil part of oil paint and any number of other industrial uses. And so they said, we'll call it marijuana, and we'll vilify people who are using this. And there were not too many Caucasians that were using cannabis at that time. And the Hispanics who used cannabis were the only ones who called it marijuana. The African Americans called it Muggles or Mary Jane. They didn't call it marijuana. And as a matter of fact, the AMA said they almost didn't make it to the hearings because they had no idea they were talking about cannabis. So we got along growing cannabis in this country from before the founding of the United States of America, from people coming over here as colonists. And we had it in the United States Pharmacopoeia for 75 years, and nobody had any problem with it. And oh, by the way, Harry Anslinger, who was the greatest bureaucrat of all time, he created a problem where none existed. There was no problem with cannabis, and he was responsible for getting Reefer Madness out there. He wrote a number of newspaper articles that Hearst was all too happy to publish, and got people afraid of something that they had been using for 75 years.
So the hemp industry could replace a lot of the plastic industry.
Yeah, the hemp industry would be great competition to the oil interests. As a matter of fact, it is an incredible place to look for new jobs. I asked a question of a candidate for supervisor here in Santa Barbara County about, because he was talking about employment and jobs, and I asked him about hemp, and he had no idea what I was talking about. And they had just talked about the oil spill here in Santa Barbara, and I pointed out in my question that if it had been hemp ethanol, it would not have caused any damage to the environment. And again, this candidate had absolutely no idea of what I was talking about, yet it played into one of his campaign planks that he wanted to increase employment here in Santa Barbara County. I think that the willful ignorance that we have in this country, particularly by politicians, but also by the media, is unconscionable.
And how do we overcome the ignorance of doctors in this day and age that don't know about the endocannabinoid system?
Well, I guess the best way to do it is to put pressure on the state legislatures to have them allocate money as a carrot to encourage teaching about the endocannabinoid system. In a survey done by Dr. David Allen, a cardiologist, who I believe he himself called up all of the medical schools in the United States and found that only 13% of them taught about the endocannabinoid system. Forget about talking about cannabis or cannabinoids as medicine. We are seeing this very, very slowly roll out, and we are seeing Some um, medical schools incorporate this, but even when it's incorporated, it's done somewhat with a laugh. I attended a conference done at the medical school in Oregon where they were talking about the use of cannabis for treating epilepsy and talking specifically about the Epidiolex made by GW Pharmaceuticals. And there was a fair amount of snickering in the audience when this guy brought it up. And yet we know that cannabis for seizures is extraordinarily helpful. And why would you laugh at something that is so safe as cannabis and so beneficial? By the same token, there wasn't quite as much snickering, but down here at Cedars-Sinai, every year they have a one-day seminar on pain management, and they did have a very good presentation by somebody on the use of cannabis for pain. But we need to see this much more common, much more frequently. Frankly, I think that the best way for American physicians would be if some prominent person, like the President of the United States, Barack Obama, or the former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, who may have used cannabis to cure his brain tumor. If he did, I'd like him to say so.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's really what we need. One of the best things that's happened in terms of getting doctors to open up a little bit was the documentary done by Sanjay Gupta on CNN. But we need to see, when they talk about policy about cannabis on CNN, on MSNBC, on Fox News, we need to see them interview clinicians. We need to see them interview researchers. We don't need to see them interviewing people who are just shooting off their mouth.
Well, we really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us, and
My pleasure.
I can't thank you enough for all that you've done and continue to do. So.
Well, I appreciate it, and I always feel a little bit self-conscious when people thank me, because the beneficial effects of cannabis and the few side effects are so obvious and have been obvious for a long time. And it's clear to me that the reason that we've taken the position that we have is because of the lack of character of politicians in the United States of America.
And do you think Donald Trump would have a positive effect?
I think Donald Trump, I think most of his Republican competitors and both of his Democratic competitors feel, is that he will be a incredible disaster, not only to the United States but to the world. And this man is a fool.
I have to agree. Let's just hope greater minds and hearts prevail.
Right. I mean, it's unfortunate, I'll tell you, the only political candidate at the presidential level that gets it was Judge Gray, who was the Libertarian Party candidate for vice president. Oh, I'll say this. Gary Johnson, actually, I heard him speak on cannabis, and what he had to say was brilliant. Unfortunately, what he has to say about other things is pretty much the Libertarian Party line, and it does not match in brilliance what he had to say about cannabis.
Well, let's hope for some brilliant legislation and progress.
Yeah,
Next.
yeah. No, it would be nice if somebody besides Jon Stewart had Gary Johnson on as a guest, and I don't know whether any national outlet had Judge Gray on as a guest. And the thing about Judge Gray is he is was a very conservative Republican, a libertarian-leaning Republican, and he has repeatedly said, I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. And it's going to be interesting to me to see whether or not the Never Trump movement turns to the Libertarian Party as the possibility for their third party candidate. I think that we would then have the national discussion about medicinal cannabis that is long, long overdue. If you want to know all you want to know about cannabis and why we have the laws we have against it, run out and buy my book. The book has its own website. Look, I encourage people who are looking at this to do your reading, to be patient when you're arguing with people, and to bring the facts to the public's attention. We have made an enormous amount of progress in the last 60 years. The sad point is that it's taken us 60 years to make this progress, and I'd like to see the remaining progress to having a sane drug policy, which, by the way, we shouldn't prohibit anything. We should recognize that some of these drugs have problems and that treatment should be available. But it is unbelievable that the state of California, in the last 30, 40 years, has built 25 new prisons and 3 new universities. That priority is not my priority, and it shouldn't be anybody's priority in the state of California or in the United States.
That's a horrible statistic, and hopefully that will change as well.
Yeah. Sadly, there are way, way too many sobering statistics.